We want to get to Kyle Seraphin in a moment here, former FBI whistleblower on this Pam Bondi story and the Epstein files. But first, this didn't take long. Take away their military funding and weapons in Ukraine, and they back down. Imagine doing that to Israel. Oh, sorry. That's not going to happen. I love the hypocrisy, though, in Washington, D.C. But with Ukraine, of course, it did happen. That was an easy one. That's a layup. President Trump has officially cut off all aid to Ukraine. And then just like clockwork, Zelensky crawls back and says he's ready for peace. That's amazing how all of this works. Here's his post on X. I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace. When did you iterate that? Why are you reiterating it? When did you iterate that in the first place? I don't remember you ever iterating that.
That's not a redundancy, because when President Trump invited you to speak about peace, you only mentioned weapons.
Yeah. I don't remember any iteration of this. Anyway, he's going to reiterate peace. None of us wants an endless war. Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer, blah, 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 on and on and on. He says, we really do value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty. And then he repeats a line that Trump said to him the other day. And we remember the moment when things changed, when President Trump provided Ukraine with javelins. We are grateful for this. Literally took a line right out of President Trump, who repeated himself 5 times about the javelins. Okay. Anyway, according to Reuters, about an hour ago, before we started the show, President Trump Zelensky planned to sign the Ukrainian mineral deal today. It might be happening as we speak. And then Trump is going to announce that minerals deal tonight during his congressional address tonight.
But it does not seem that will happen in person.
No.
Again, Marco Rubio, after that confrontation in the White House, said, look, we didn't even need to do this. We offered the Ukrainians to do this on paper. Ever heard of DocuSign? Ever heard of fax it back? Like, we don't actually have to do this in person.
We don't need
you. And in fact, they shouldn't.
Yeah,
right? I think we all can agree.
We don't need him flying back to the United States on our tax dollars. But meanwhile, so all of this is happening. Oh, yeah, we really want peace. We're committed to peace. New video overnight emerging, showing once again what J.D. Vance called out the other day, Ukraine's conscription service. I don't know if you guys have ever hired these guys. They come and they do a lot of moving for you. They'll just come to your town. If they've got somebody who they want to join the front lines, they'll pick them up, throw them in a van, and they'll bring them right to a conscription office and then send them right to the front lines, right back into the meat grinder, so that these individuals can be killed in 2 weeks. That's the service that they provide young Ukrainian men, and all the way up to 60 years old now in Ukraine. That's a fabulous service that democracy provides to you.
Do you have to pay extra for those back of the head slaps?
It's better than an Uber ride.
Those are free.
It's really fantastic.
Those are free.
It's free.
And if you get one, you can get another one for free too. It's a good deal.
And if you run away, you get an extra right. It's really
none of those men seem to be resisting. They are resigned to their fate. So why do you need to be slapping them? Maybe they're saying something they don't like.
Let them know who's in charge. You're going to the front lines. We need more meat for the meat grinder. That's democracy in action in Ukraine. Let's put an end to that.
No, Clayton. That's what liberals mean when they say they stand with Ukraine. They like that.
Oh, okay. I just want to be sure about that.
Free speech is under attack. Yesterday, over the weekend on X, I posted a script of the new deal between Ukraine and the UK, which says that they are going to push to end propaganda, which means that free speech platforms are under attack, which means we've seen Rumble be attacked in Brazil, in France. It's only a matter of time before these authoritarian governments continue to take away free speech. That's why it's so important to support those who stand for free speech, like Rumble. And in fact, you can do that by subscribing to Rumble Premium. If you use our code Redacted, you'll save $10 off and you'll support free speech. Again, to strengthen their mission, we are so excited to be Rumble creators and to promote Rumble Premium because, again, it's a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. Now, if you've been with Redacted for a while, you know we've been punished on other platforms for, reading Pfizer's own clinical trials of their COVID vaccine, for speaking out about the Ukrainian army that attacks the Ukrainian people. We were punished on other platforms, but not on Rumble. We were free to say those things, and we have been proven right, I'm happy to say, and I'm so glad that we had a platform to do so. So support Rumble by using the code Redacted and going to rumble.com/premium.
Where are the JFK files? Where are the Epstein files? Where are the UFO files? Where are all the files? Attorney General Pam Bondi was asked this question last night on Hannity because you remember that whole weird thing last week where a lot of binders were handed handed out of all publicly available information. These binders were handed out to influencers who got invited to the White House, and then they held up the binders and took a photo op and all of that. Very bizarre set of circumstances. It was a flop, of course. It didn't really make any sense. Well, here was Pam Bondi last night explaining exactly where these FBI files have been held in New York and what she's now doing with the thousands of pages. Watch.
We all did. And the FBI handed over a couple hundred pages of documents. But, you know, Sean, I gave them a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything. And a source had told me where the documents were being kept. Southern District of New York, shock. So we got them all by, hopefully all of them, Friday at 8 a.m., thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Cash is also, now that we have Cash here, it's a game changer, of course, and Cash is going to, Director Patel is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents.
Okay.
So, okay, lots of questions here. Let's ask Kyle Seraphin, former FBI whistleblower, head of the host of the Kyle Seraphin Show, joins us today from Texas. And I know, Kyle, you've been pretty, I don't say upset, but kind of confused as well. And watching all of this unfold, she says a source tells her that these are being held in New York. First of all, just what do you make of that piece of it? And we'll dive a little bit deeper here.
Yeah, the language is really concerning. You have sources in an agency that works for you. How does that work out exactly? Like, they work for you. They're an indirect report. I mean, I understand that people don't understand what it is that we're talking about when we deal with the FBI and what the DOJ is, but the DOJ, the Department of Justice, is the cabinet level department, right? And one of the sub agencies is called the FBI. So everybody in the FBI theoretically rolls up to the head of the DOJ, which is the Attorney General. We also just heard her say, you know, we asked where the files were, and they said that they were at the Southern District of New York. And then she rolls her eyes like, of course. The Southern District of New York works for the Attorney General. What are we talking about here? Like, did they walk in there? And this is what I'm worried about. I'm worried about that people got into this fight and they didn't realize what they were getting into. And I'm seeing some signs of that at the FBI as well. I've been screaming this from my little platform that I've got. We're talking about the first battle in a serious war. And the war is the same way that we took, let's say, Afghanistan. You don't have to agree with why we did it, but the mechanism by which you take a country, you land a landing force of some kind. You have to gather and make a foothold so that you can operate out of that base. And then you charge forward and seize ground. You do it as quickly as possible. And then you got to hold it. Okay. What we're seeing is like the beach landing. And I used this analogy this morning, the beach landing on the FBI, which is foreign territory. It is a captured, ideologically sort of self-interested, management-run, corrupted cesspool. There's all kinds of problems there. There's all kinds of great agents there, too, that want to be on your team. But you got to link up with those friendlies. You got to get them in a place where they know that they can actually get information up and they can be elevated into positions of responsibility. And you got to get rid of the rot that is all of this management culture that's terrible. And we're not seeing it. It's just not happening. Like, the roadmap should have been so clear that on day one, in fact, on day -8 days before Kash Patel showed up, we should have had things in play. And part of the reason that they do a transition team is so that when the Attorney General shows up, it's full speed ahead. You start making it your agency. And people have been coming at me on social media saying, well, give her some time. She's only been there 2 weeks. If you didn't walk in with some day 1, day 2, day 3 priorities of who needed to be axed, who needed to be eliminated, and what your game plan was to seize control of a hostile agency, you already failed. So 2 weeks in, if we're not figuring this stuff out, why are you on Sean Hannity? You know, like, what are you doing on Fox News?
Right.
But we have copious evidence of sabotage inside the FBI. We have this letter from James Dennehy, who now was ousted as the head of that office, saying, hey, this is our big battle. Everyone dig in. So what she's trying to lay out for us is that there have been saboteurs and she's having to work around it. And so what you're saying is, there will always be saboteurs. There has to have been a plan in place for this.
There should have been.
Because otherwise we've been overpromised and underdelivered. Is that what you're saying?
Well, here's the other thing. Yeah, Natalie. So there's no paper files. I mean, you can have paper files and that's great. I don't know why you want to. This is 2025. If anybody thinks that the FBI is transmitting documents via paper files, and they're carrying boxes in to the Southern District of New York to be able to do prosecutions. They've lost their mind. You burn off DVDs like everybody else does. All of the files were held at the FBI's field office in New York, which means they were accessible in Washington, D.C. too. It's a system called Sentinel. That's just how this works. All of the FBI's case files, and it doesn't matter how sensitive they are. They've got a top secret enclave, they've got a secret enclave, and they've got an unclass enclave. So there are 3 levels of computers. I used to have 3 different terminals on my desk with 3 different sets of monitors. It's very inefficient, but that's what you got. You can access them from anywhere as long as you have permissions to do so. So there's no reason why the senior members of the FBI couldn't access it from anywhere. You don't have to physically be in New York. The only thing that would physically be there is the actual physical evidence. And why would you be taking that over to Main Justice? There's no real reason, because you're going to have pictures, you're going to have descriptions, you're going to have what the catalog of exactly what was collected, most of which is not going to be in the public sphere and shouldn't be if they're going to do prosecutions. So this is a digital age. There's no trucks full of paperwork. That's nonsense. Like they're snowing us with this visual that's ridiculous.
And then it comes back to what you pointed out, the source, right? I learned from a source that they're being held in New York. It doesn't make any sense. Like that, it doesn't pass the smell test. Another thing that doesn't pass the smell test to me was when she said, this is a national security issue. National security. This is a child trafficking operation, pedophile network. From what I know, what national security issues? I mean, we know that Epstein was an FBI informant at one point. Is it ties to Mossad, like a foreign intelligence service, Israel?
That's what we've been hearing for a long time. Yeah, I don't have evidence of it directly, and obviously I haven't reviewed any more files than anybody else has publicly because I wasn't on this case. But I hear the same things you do, and it makes sense that there were various different Israeli connections. So whether Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were working on behalf of the Israelis or other affiliated, it's very possible that he was working on behalf of more than one, or that, people, once you start getting leveraged at that level and you have that kind of money, I got friends that have a lot of money. When you have 7- and 8-figure net worth, then you start realizing that people who have a lot of money might come talk to you from the intelligence agencies. They do it domestically in the United States. There's an entire group of the FBI that goes out and recruits sources that have a lot of money that travel in certain spheres. If you go internationally, then there's a certain group that will come out called National Resource. They'll come from the CIA. If you start traveling a lot just domestically and you travel in the spheres of, let's say, computers and computer science and computer software, then you might have people coming in from the various different cybersecurity organizations, to include CISA or FBI. So yeah, you're going to have, connections. What that means specifically, or how compromised somebody is, or whether or not they're working on behalf of, or whether they've been co-opted into doing this work. That's what the Chinese will do. They'll lean on people. So that's a technique that can be done. And Israel's kind of an interesting animal, because although they are an ally of the United States, in many ways, they work as an allied force. They're also kind of a frenemy, if we're being real honest about it. There are aspects of Israel, I want to play real fairly here, that is sort of predatory, and they take things from the United States, and the U.S. kind of tolerates it as, and it's not because the U.S. is necessarily controlled by Israel. It's because our interests align enough times that they kind of are like, hey, get out of the cookie jar sometimes. So you'll actually have cases that are counterintelligence against the Israelis at the same time as they'll be working actively as sources, or they'll be working in a military sense on behalf of U.S. interest. So that's kind of a mess to begin with. But yeah, are there national security interests? I thought that was baked into the cake. Like, how do you walk into DOJ? If I know that and you know that, how does she not know that on day one, like I said, or day 8, 8 times before she even shows up? This should have been the discussion that was had prior to actually being nominated, one would think, because I know how these nominations work. You get asked, what's your plan? Who's your team? What's your roadmap look like? What's your battle plan to be able to walk into this agency and make it not weaponized? And if we're being really clear, there are probably 3 incredibly dangerous parts of the federal government right now. One of them is the IRS, because they have the ability to take your money and they have the ability to lock you up if you don't play along. And so they've been weaponized before. And the other one is DOJ, which actually does the prosecution of it. And by extension, the FBI is the teeth in the dog of the DOJ. If there was not a strong plan to come in and make that thing politically neutral, would be the best case scenario, or just neutered altogether and defanged, then this is all for naught. Everything else is, USAID and talking about being able to get rid of government waste. That's all nice. I want government to be small as possible, but I also want the people that can actually come into your door and kill you to be on the right track, where they're actually looking at the Constitution and not playing winners and losers in politics, which is what we saw for the last 4 years.
So what can they do to regain our trust at this point? We're not going to get an unredacted document dump, clearly.
Sure.
Could they fire the people who were hiding documents from senior officials?
Yeah, all of them.
Okay.
They all need to go.
Right. That's one thing. And then what? Because they're saying we're going to get this in piecemeal. What do you think how can they regain our trust at this point? And, what is the best benefit of the doubt that we can offer that, whoa, this was overwhelming and they overpromised and didn't know what they were getting themselves into?
Yeah, I don't need documents. And honestly, neither do you. What you want to see indictments, which means they presented evidence to a grand jury and said that there's enough information here to go out and cause an arrest. We want to see those next. And then we want to see prosecutions carried on. And then we'd like to see convictions. So build solid cases and put people in jail that did something really evil, like abuse children. And if they happen to be a national security threat as well, charge them there or make deals with them to roll up further as you need to. And then use statecraft if that's required, because we're dealing with nation state actors. So be it. Like, Trump is not scared of pressuring people. He's not scared of pulling funding. He's not scared of saying things that other people are really kind of worried about. He can be a bull in the china shop. And what's the cost? He's not going to get another term. This is his term. So we've seen it kind of on one side. And I've heard other people say, how come they haven't reinstated guys like Kyle? I don't necessarily want to be reinstated. I actually don't want to be reinstated. I don't want to work for the FBI anymore. I like doing what I do. This is way more fun. But I do want to see guys that want to go back to work there. Like, if you're a whistleblower and you got removed, I just got 50 pages of documents before we went live from the DOJ saying that they've looked at my equal opportunity employment complaint. And in 50 pages, they told me that all 13 of the retaliations that they acknowledged were potentially retaliatory, none of them actually had any evidence that I was retaliated against. And it was given to me by a DOJ contractor. So look, it's totally unfair what is done. I'd like to see some corrections. Bring in the people that know where the bodies are. And for anybody that says, well, it's politics and there's a backlash, because that's what I've been hearing. Well, we can't bring on my buddy Garrett O'Boyle has been 29 months with no pay. The FBI removed him for something that I did, and I have acknowledged publicly that I did, and so did the company that I went to. I went to Project Veritas in May of 2022, and I exposed that the FBI was actually lying, and that the Southern District of New York was lying in federal court to a judge and they were presenting statements that were factually false. And when they did that, they got slapped, and that case went away simply because of what I did. And that's fine. I'll take the heat for that. And, I don't want to go back. But my buddy didn't do it, and they removed him. And the fact that they're not putting him back in, it's not about political backlash. They just named Dan Bongino to be the number 2 in the FBI. There is no more politically aggressive move than that, based on all the things that Dan has said. So you can't tell me that they're worried about hurting people's feelings. You need to bring people in that know what the roadmap looks like. If you were going to go into a foreign country and try to stage a coup, the first thing that our special forces guys do, they do really good map recon. They look at the satellite imagery, and they get a local guide. They co-opt somebody that's a friendly to help work, help them go around and find out where to go. You need a tour guide to the FBI. And it can't be some retired guy that left in 2016 and never saw the weaponization. It's got to be someone that left in 21, 22, 23 that saw the ugly end of this thing, because the default position for most people inside the FBI, and DOJ is the same way, by the way, most people leave there and feel really good about what they did. You got to find people that are a little bit disgruntled and think, hey, this agency was something and it is not that thing anymore. And I'd like to see it return to an apolitical, if possible. It's been a long time since it's been that way, but let's see it actually honestly treated like they give a darn about the Constitution. and that's the guiding press. It doesn't need to be partisan, but that's what we were promised. And so if you want to go ahead and give me what we were promised an apolitical DOJ that's going to swing back aggressively towards protecting American civil liberties. By the way, the left should also cheer for that. They shouldn't want to see this thing swing back and forth every election cycle.
No, we need a tour guide through the cesspool. And by the way, we would not want you to go back to the FBI. We love you where you are, because you're a voice of reason in this craziness right now. So we'll get, like I say, Pam Bondi is a friend. I consider her a friend. But again, this smells weird, and we're going to call it out. And we want answers right now. And I think the American people are sick and tired of this.
I hadn't thought of it that simply. Indictments. Indict the people who hurt children and young girls. And young boys.
No more binders with influence. No more binders with influencers.
Don't give me or those,
think about this.
Those pink call me back pads. I don't want to see those anymore. We've seen them.
Think about any major criminal case that's been done. You don't try it in the court of public opinion. They do a little bit. They do some messaging. But at the end of the day, you don't need to actually see the evidence. You'll see it when they go to trial. That's what you should be geared toward. And you don't want to reveal it before it's supposed to be done. There's a process. That process, by the way, is that the FBI builds the case, then they bring discovery over to the attorneys, and the attorneys get it. And that means the FBI didn't lose their only copy of it. So the idea that it was only at the Southern District of New York, when I heard her say that, she was like, there were hundreds of pages. I was like, wait, where are the files? I had this view of Zoolander. You remember when the two guys are the two male models? You got Owen Wilson and you got Ben Stiller. And they're like, they're in. Yeah, the files are in the computer. It's so simple. They're always in the computer. That's where they keep the files.
They're always there.
Come on.
They're digital files.
Don't try to screw with me. The system is called Sentinel. For everybody who wants to know, it's called Sentinel. That's where you keep your case files. That's where you build the files in the FBI. I guarantee they're still there. And there should be some spin-off cases. Both of you guys should realize that. If there was one major person, we all saw what happened in January 6th. They spun off a ton of cases based on one event. They arrested Epstein. They were charging him. They arrested a co-conspirator. How many others should be out there? There should be cases wherever those people live all around the United States. They're all accessible from Washington, D.C. and from New York City and from any other FBI field office.
Yeah. So I think that, Fox News should be asking her, how big is your legal team? You're going to need a lot of litigants, right? So that's where we need to go. Okay, so they didn't give me the chance to ask those questions.
They should put an entire task force on this, honest to God. And I made this recommendation, I think on I might have said this at Benny Johnson's show, but at the end of the day, you could take all of those case files and you could sequester them on a hard system outside of the major urban areas. That's probably a good idea. Hire on some seasoned investigators that have no instance of bias, that probably don't pay attention to the news. And there's plenty of them, by the way. There's a lot of that. Get some attorneys that have been there for a while, that have showed that they are willing to play ball and they're willing to prosecute people on the left and the right. It has nothing to do with that. And make sure that these people are financially solvent so they can't be blackmailed or extorted and they can't have anybody come after them, because that's a real problem. There's a lot of people in the federal government that don't have a lot of money. They don't know how to figure out money. And so they're vulnerable in that way, even if they're not supposed to be. And you get those people, and I don't know where you put them. Maybe Pocatello, Idaho. There's a place there. You can move them to anywhere. You can put them in Billings, Montana. There's actually a big facility there as well. Move them somewhere. Put them in West Virginia. Put them out in Winchester. Give them a space to operate where nobody's going to screw with them, and they can do only this, and relieve them all the administrative duties of being an agent. Get rid of the virtual academies and the stupid trainings and the DEI stuff, or whatever we're calling it today, that they're supposed to be up to date on, and the human resources nonsense. Get rid of it. And let these people focus on doing this job only until it's done, like a special counsel's office, but it would just be a special task force for Epstein. And it wouldn't be that hard to do. And there's public support on the left and the right behind that.
Yeah. Kyle Seraphin, thank you so much for joining us. This is a really great analysis because you know that of which you speak. Thank you so much for coming on Redacted and offering us your time.
And check out the Kyle Seraphin Show. Always great. Kyle, great to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for your insights.
Good seeing both of you.